What if a dream could build a world? What if a single, luminous idea, born in the heart of a visionary, could cast a shadow so vast it would stretch across continents, across cultures, across the very measure of time itself, only to vanish into whispers and sand? Before we journey further, take a moment to like this video and subscribe. Join us as we uncover the lost and hidden stories of Persia that textbooks forgot. Imagine an empire not forged merely in the crucible of conquest, but conceived as a symphony of peoples, a vast and intricate tapestry woven from the threads of 100 different nations, each retaining its color, its texture, its unique and vibrant soul, all bound together by a thread of gold, a shared allegiance not to a tyrant, but to a throne that promised order, that promised peace, that promised a place for all within its grand design. This was not a mere kingdom. It was a proposition, an argument made in stone and law, in road and coin, an answer to the eternal question of how humanity might live together in all its glorious, chaotic diversity. It was a fire lit in the heart of ancient Persia, a blaze that would illuminate the known world, drawing all eyes to its warmth and its terrifying, beautiful power. But what happens when such a fire consumes itself? What remains when the grand palaces, the beating hearts of this colossal creation, fall silent, when their soaring columns crumble and their gilded halls become homes for the wind and the scorpion? What is left when a memory, so potent it shaped the destiny of millions, fades from the minds of men, leaving behind only riddles carved in rock and the enigmatic ghosts of cities that were once the centers of the universe? We stand today at the edge of a great forgetting, a chasm of centuries that separates us from this monumental past. And we ask ourselves, can we still trace the outlines of this lost world, this forgotten dream? Can we walk the silent? We must become archaeologists of the soul, digging not only into the earth that has so jealously guarded these secrets, but into the very idea of what it means to build something that lasts and what it means to watch it fall. So I invite you now to step out of the familiar light of the present, to leave behind the certainties of your own age, and to walk with me into the magnificent, haunting twilight of the Achaemenid Empire. Let us go in search of its lost hearts, its silent, sleeping cities, and in their monumental ruin, let us seek to understand the epic story of their birth, their glory, and their fiery, tragic end. Join the shared exploration, this circle of seekers, and together, let us listen for the whispers of Pasargadae, Susa, Ecbatana, and the magnificent doomed Persepolis, for their story is, in the end, a part of our own. It is a testament to the highest aspirations and the deepest sorrows of the human experiment, a grand and poignant drama that continues to unfold even now in the silent waiting stones. Let the journey begin. Before the city, there was the man. And before the man, there was the idea, an idea so radical and so resonant it would bend the arc of history. To understand the genesis of the first Achaemenid capital, the garden city of Pasargadae, one must first step into the mind of its creator, Cyrus the Great. He was not merely a conqueror, though his conquests were legendary. He was a political philosopher whose medium was the earth itself. He saw a world fractured by endless cycles of brutal domination, where one power rose only to crush another, enslaving its people and erasing its gods. Cyrus envisioned something different. He envisioned an empire as a family of nations, a commonwealth where conquered peoples were not subjugated but integrated, where their traditions were not extinguished but respected, and where their gods were not cast down but honored. This was the core of the Achaemenid Revolution, a revolution in governance that required a new kind of capital. It could not be a fortress built on fear, nor a mere administrative hub of grim efficiency. It had to be the physical embodiment of the dream itself. And so, on the plain where he had won his decisive victory over the Medes, the victory that sealed his destiny and founded his empire, Cyrus began to build Pasargadae. The name itself whispers of its purpose, perhaps meaning Persian settlements or protective club, a home and a shield for his people. He chose a vast, elevated plain in the heartland of Pars, a place of sweeping vistas and clear, high light, irrigated by the gentle meanderings of the Pulvar River. Here, he would not raise a dense and imposing metropolis in the Mesopotamian style. Instead, he would lay out a paradise. Indeed, it is from the old Persian Pasargadae, a walled garden, that we derive our modern word paradise, and Pasargadae was conceived as the ultimate royal garden. It was a city built around a park. Imagine it, a sprawling, manicured landscape of over 160 hectares, where pavilions and palaces were not clustered together for defense, but stood in splendid isolation, scattered like jewels across a carpet of green. They were designed to be viewed through avenues of trees, their stone columns rising from meadows and reflected in the still waters of meticulously engineered canals. This was an architecture of landscape, a statement that the highest form of power was not domination over man, but harmony with nature. The very layout was a declaration of peace and security, a testament to an empire so confident in its stability that its capital could afford to be open, serene, and beautiful. This was a place for contemplation as much as for governance, a space where the King of Kings could walk among the trees and waterways and reflect on the vast, multicultural world he now commanded. The genius of Cyrus and the revolutionary spirit of Pasargadae was expressed most powerfully in its architecture. The structures that dotted this immense royal park were not born of a single monolithic tradition. They were a deliberate and sophisticated fusion of the artistic and engineering traditions of the people Cyrus had brought into his fold. It was a visual language of unity, a declaration in stone that the Achaemenid Empire was not a Persian conquest, but a global synthesis. As you approached the residential palace, you would see tall, slender columns, their fluting and bases reminiscent of the work of Ionian Greek artisans from the coast of Anatolia. The techniques used to join the massive limestone blocks, with their precise cuttings and anathyrosis, were also a hallmark of Greek masonry, suggesting that Cyrus had summoned the finest craftsmen from the westernmost reaches of his new domain to help build its heart. Yet, the overall form of the palaces, the hypostyle halls with their forests of columns supporting a vast roof, was a concept borrowed from the grand traditions of Egypt and Mesopotamia. As you passed through the monumental gateway, the Gate R, you would be confronted by a colossal winged figure, a guardian genius 4.5 meters tall. This awe-inspiring being wore an Elamite robe, a triple Ative crown of Egyptian origin, and possessed 4 wings in the powerful style of Assyrian protective spirits. An inscription, now lost but recorded by travelers, once identified this composite deity with Cyrus himself. I, Cyrus, the king, an Achaemenid. This was not mere artistic borrowing, it was a profound political statement. It proclaimed that the Persian king was the rightful heir to all the ancient majesties of the world, that the virtues and powers of Elam, Egypt, and Assyria were now subsumed and harmonized within the singular, universal authority of the Achaemenid throne. Every detail, from the black and white limestone blocks used to create a striking visual contrast, to the now vanished reliefs that likely depicted Cyrus in the manner of an Assyrian monarch receiving tribute, was designed to be both beautiful and ideologically potent. Pasargadae was a city that spoke in a multicultural tongue, a place where a Lydian, a Babylonian, or an Ionian could see a reflection of their own heritage and feel not that they had been conquered, but that they had become part of something larger and more magnificent than they had been before. It was the architectural manifestation of a global vision, a quiet but insistent argument for a new kind of world order. At the heart of the garden city of Pasargadae, standing as its most enduring and poignant monument, is the tomb of its founder. The mausoleum of Cyrus the Great is a structure of sublime simplicity and profound power, a final, definitive statement of the man's character and the philosophy upon which he built his empire. It stands apart on the southern edge of the Morkab Plain, a solitary object in the vast landscape, drawing the eye and the soul towards it. Unlike the grandiose pyramids of the pharaohs or the elaborate burial mounds of other ancient kings, Cyrus's final resting place is a model of restraint and dignity. A gabled chamber, resembling a simple house of the Anatolian or Ionian style, sits atop a massive, six-tiered limestone plinth. The plinth, a kind of stepped pyramid, elevates the humble house tomb towards the heavens, giving it a monumental presence without resorting to ornate decoration or colossal size. The effect is one of quiet, unshakable authority. It is both deeply personal and universally resonant, a human-scaled shelter built upon a foundation of cosmic significance. Greek historians, writing centuries later but drawing on contemporary accounts, tell us of the spell it cast even on the world's next great conqueror. When Alexander the Great reached Pasargadae in 3030 BC, he did not destroy it as he would later destroy Persepolis. Instead, he approached the tomb with a sense of reverence. He commanded one of his followers, Aristobulus, to enter the small, low doorway. Inside, he reported finding a golden couch, a table laden with golden drinking vessels, a golden coffin, and precious jewels. Most famously, Iran and Strabo record an inscription, now long vanished, that was said to have been carved there. Its wording varies slightly in their accounts, but its message is one of magnificent, humbling simplicity. Passerby, I am Cyrus, who gave the Persians an empire and was king of Asia. Grudge me not therefore this monument. In this inscription, whether literal or apocryphal, lies the essence of Cyrus. There is no boastful list of conquests, no litany of vanquished foes, no appeal to divine right. There is only a simple statement of fact, a quiet pride in his achievement, and a direct personal appeal to the common humanity of the traveler. It is the voice of a man secure in his legacy, who understood that true greatness needed no embellishment. The tomb is the anchor of Pasargadae's dream, a silent testament to the idea that the most powerful empire in the world could be founded on a principle of magnanimity, a principle embodied by the man who lay within, resting in the heart of the paradise he had built. The dream of Pasargadae, however serene and beautiful, was the dream of a founder, the vision of a single, extraordinary individual. An empire, if it is to endure, requires more than a beautiful idea. It needs sinew, bone, and a relentless, beating heart. It needs structure, law, and a centralized will to impose order on its vast and disparate territories. After the death of Cyrus and the troubled, brief reign of his son Cambyses, a new kind of ruler ascended the Achaemenid throne. This was Darius I, known to history as Darius the Great, and he was not a visionary poet but a pragmatic genius, an organizer of unparalleled skill and ambition. He understood that the sprawling, multicultural empire Cyrus had won needed to be woven together more tightly, to be administered with an iron hand clad in a velvet glove. He needed a capital that was not a contemplative garden retreat, but a dynamic, working center of government. Pasargadae would remain a vital symbolic and ceremonial site, the sacred place of coronation for all future Achaemenid kings, but it was too remote, too placid to serve as the administrative hub of a global superpower. For this, Darius turned to Susa, a city with a history as deep and as ancient as any in the world. Susa was not a Persian creation. Long before the Achaemenids, it had been the magnificent capital of the Elamite kingdom, a major power in its own right, situated strategically on the plains of Khuzestan at the foot of the Zagros Mountains, controlling the vital trade routes between Mesopotamia and the Iranian plateau. By choosing Susa as one of his primary administrative capitals, Darius was making another profound statement. He was grafting his new Persian dynasty onto the ancient rootstock of Elamite civilization, claiming its history and its prestige as his own. He was also positioning his government in the heart of the Old World, closer to the ancient and wealthy centers of power like Babylon. Susa became the winter capital, a bustling metropolis from which the great king could issue decrees, receive ambassadors, and manage the intricate bureaucracy of the satrapies. It was here that the machinery of empire was forged, where the tribute from 24 nations was recorded and administered, and where the grand strategy for a domain stretching from India to Ethiopia was conceived. The spirit of Susa was not the tranquil poetry of Pasargadae. It was the powerful, rhythmic prose of imperial administration. To make the ancient Elamite capital of Susa a worthy seat of Achaemenid power, Darius initiated a building program of breathtaking scale and ambition. He did not erase the city's past, but built upon it, creating a new royal complex on a raised citadel that would dominate the landscape and proclaim the arrival of a new world order. Our knowledge of this magnificent palace is not drawn merely from its scattered ruins, but from the proud words of Darius himself, inscribed on foundation charters that were unearthed by archaeologists. In these texts, known as the DSF inscription, Darius details the construction of his palace, and in doing so provides a stunning portrait of the empire as a single, integrated economic and artistic organism. He tells us, "This palace which I built at Susa, from afar its ornamentation was brought." He then lists with meticulous pride the origins of the materials and the peoples who worked them. The cedar timber was brought from the mountains of Lebanon, carried by Assyrians to Babylon, and from there by Carians and Ionians to Susa. The precious teakwood came from Gandhara and Carmania, the gold from Sardis and Bactria, the lapis lazuli and carnelian from Sogdiana, the turquoise from Chorasmia, and the silver and ebony from Egypt. The craftsmen who adorned the palace were a similar congress of nations. The stonecutters were Ionians and Sardians, the goldsmiths were Medes and Egyptians, the wood carvers were Sardians and Egyptians, and the men who baked the brilliantly colored glazed bricks were Babylonians. The palace of Susa was, therefore, a literal microcosm of the Achaemenid Empire. It was built by the empire for the empire out of the substance of the empire itself. Every column, every gateway, every decorative frieze was a testament to the great king's ability to command the resources and the talents of a vast and diverse world. The most famous surviving artworks from the palace, the magnificent friezes of glazed bricks, now housed in the Louvre, showcase this imperial style. The frieze of archers depicts the elite Persian infantry, the immortals, in stunning color and detail, a vision of disciplined, unified power. Another frieze shows mythical winged griffins, their bodies a composite of lion and eagle. Powerful symbols of royal authority drawn from Mesopotamian tradition, but rendered with a uniquely Persian elegance. Susa under Darius became a showpiece of imperial grandeur, a city designed to awe and intimidate, to demonstrate through its sheer opulence and multicultural craftsmanship the limitless power and reach of the Achaemenid king. While Susa pulsed with the political and administrative energy of the Achaemenid Empire, it was also a city steeped in a much older, deeper stream of history, a place where the lives of kings and prophets intertwined, lending it a mythic resonance that transcends mere political history. The city's prominence in the Hebrew Bible, particularly as the setting for the dramatic story of Esther, has ensured its place in the memory of the West long after many other imperial capitals had faded into obscurity. The Book of Esther portrays Susa, referred to as Shushan, as a place of immense wealth, courtly intrigue, and existential danger. It describes the opulent court of a Persian king, usually identified with Xerxes Ers, the successor of Darius, detailing its elaborate banquets and the vastness of an empire ruling, from India even unto Ethiopia, over 107 provinces. It is in this grand and perilous setting that Esther, a Jewish orphan, rises to become queen and, through her courage and cunning, saves her people from the genocidal plot of the king's vizier, Haman. Whether read as historical fact or as a powerful novella of diaspora life, the story embeds Susa in a narrative of faith, survival, and divine providence. It paints a vivid picture of the city, not just as a center of power, but as a crucible of cultures where the fate of a minority people could hang in the balance, subject to the whims of a mighty and often unpredictable Oriental monarch. The city is also mentioned in the books of Nehemiah and Daniel, further cementing its significance within Judeo-Christian tradition. Susa, therefore, exists in two parallel dimensions: the historical city, a center of Achaemenid administration and architectural innovation, and the legendary city, a stage for one of history's most compelling dramas of court politics and identity. This dual identity makes its loss and rediscovery all the more profound. When archaeologists in the 19th century began to peel back the layers of the mounds at Shush, they were not just uncovering the palace of Darius, they were unearthing the very setting of these ancient, resonant stories. The stones of Susa, buried for so long, began to speak again, not only of imperial logistics and royal decrees, but of queens and courtiers, of hidden identities, and the high-stakes game of survival in a multicultural empire. The city became a bridge between the clinical record of archaeology and the living, breathing world of sacred literature. Just as the Achaemenid Empire was a layered entity with a Persian ruling class presiding over a multitude of older civilizations, so too were its capitals layered. Susa represented the fusion with the ancient Elamite world, but there was another city, more remote, more mysterious, that represented the empire's connection to its immediate predecessors, the Medes. This was Ecbatana, a name that echoes with the grandeur of lost ages. Situated high on the Iranian plateau in the foothills of the Zagros Mountains, Ecbatana was the capital of the Median kingdom, the power that Cyrus the Great had first to overcome to establish his own supremacy. Its capture in 540 BC was the foundational act of the Achaemenid Empire. Yet, in the characteristic Persian fashion of absorption rather than obliteration, Ecbatana was not destroyed. It was honored and repurposed, becoming the summer capital of the Achaemenid kings, a cool and pleasant retreat from the scorching heat of the plains of Susa and Babylon. The city itself is shrouded in a mist of legend, its description by the Greek historian Herodotus painting a picture of almost mythical splendor. He wrote in the 5th century BC of a city founded by the Median king Deioces, built on a hill and fortified by 7 concentric walls, each rising higher than the last and each painted a different color. The outer wall was white, the next black, then scarlet, blue, and orange. The final two, at the very center, were plated in silver and gold, and within them stood the royal palace and treasury. This description, with its cosmic symbolism of the 7 planets, may be more of a reflection of a deeply ingrained Persian cosmology than a literal architectural plan, but it speaks to the awe in which Ecbatana was held. It was seen as a kind of terrestrial mandala, a city that mirrored the divine order of the heavens. For the Achaemenid kings, possessing and ruling from Ecbatana was a crucial element of their legitimacy. It was a visible symbol that they were the rightful successors to the great Median kings of old, that their empire was not a rupture with the past, but its glorious culmination. Ecbatana became a key repository of the imperial treasury, a testament to its security and importance, a mountain fastness where the wealth of Asia was stored. Of all the great Achaemenid capitals, Ecbatana remains the most elusive, the most tantalizingly lost. While Pasargadae, Susa, and Persepolis have been extensively excavated, their secrets yielded to the archaeologist's spade. The ancient Median stronghold lies sleeping, for the most part, beneath the bustling modern Iranian city of Hamadan. This fact makes Ecbatana a unique case. Not a city of romantic ruins open to the sky, but a ghost city. Its grand avenues and legendary palaces still locked in the earth, their true extent and magnificence a matter of conjecture and scholarly debate. The site of the ancient city, known as Tepe-e-Ecbatana or Ecbatana Hill, has been the subject of archaeological investigation, but these excavations have been limited by the urban sprawl that covers it. What has been found is remarkable, hinting at the splendors that still lie hidden. Archaeologists have uncovered massive defensive walls, with foundations 9 meters wide, sections of stone-paved roadways, and the remains of towers and battlements. They have unearthed column bases and inscribed tablets bearing the names of Achaemenid kings like Darius and Artaxerxes, confirming the city's role as a royal residence. Treasures, too, have emerged from the soil of Hamadan, likely a fraction of the immense wealth that was once stored there. Golden rhytons, drinking vessels in the shape of lions or rams, intricate jewelry, and caches of coins all speak to the city's affluence. But these are mere fragments, whispers of the city described by Herodotus and other Greek writers like Polybius, who spoke of a royal palace of incredible opulence, with columns and beams of cedar and cypress, all covered in plates of silver and gold, and a roof made of silver tiles. When Alexander the Great captured the city in 3030 BC, his historians recorded the staggering amount of treasure he seized there. But the city itself was not destroyed. It continued to be an important center through the subsequent Seleucid, Parthian, and Sasanian empires. This continuous occupation is both a testament to its strategic importance and the reason for its archaeological invisibility. Each successive civilization built upon the last, encasing the Achaemenid summer capital in layers of history. Ecbatana is thus the ultimate lost city of the Achaemenids, not lost to memory, but lost to sight. It is a challenge to the imagination, a reminder that the past is not always a ruin to be visited, but sometimes a living presence just beneath our feet, its full story waiting for the day it can finally be brought into the light. The journey of the Achaemenid Empire, personified in its capitals, now leads us from the Genesis dream of Pasargadae, through the administrative engine of Susa and the historic mountain throne of Ecbatana, to its ultimate and most breathtaking expression. We arrive at the empire's soul, the ceremonial heartland conceived to be nothing less than a representation of the cosmos on Earth. This is Persepolis. The name itself, given by the Greeks, means the city of the Persians, and it was here, in the ancestral homeland of Fars, that the Achaemenid kings would build their grandest and most ideologically charged statement. Founded by Darius the Great around 55 BC, and expanded upon by his son Xerxes and grandson Artaxerxes, Persepolis was not a conventional city. It was not a primary seat of government like Susa, nor a military stronghold. It had little in the way of residential quarters for a large population. Instead, it appears to have been a vast ceremonial complex, a sacred stage that was likely used only seasonally, most notably for the celebration of Nowruz, the Persian New Year. It was here that the empire would come together, not to be governed, but to be renewed. It was here that the fundamental principles of the Achaemenid worldview of a divinely ordained king bringing order to a diverse world of nations were not just proclaimed, but performed. To build this sacred city, Darius chose a location of immense natural beauty and power at the foot of the Ku'e Ramat, the Mountain of Mercy. His engineers and workers performed a monumental feat, leveling and hewing out a vast terrace from the mountainside, a platform of some 125,000 square meters, upon which the palaces and halls would stand, elevated above the surrounding plain, halfway between the earth and the heavens. This terrace was a stage, and everything built upon it was part of a grand, unfolding drama of power, faith, and unity. The approach to the stage was itself a masterstroke of psychological architecture, a single, monumental staircase, wide enough for several horsemen to ride abreast, with shallow steps that forced a slow, deliberate, and reverent ascent. Upon reaching the terrace, a visitor would be confronted by the Gate of All Nations, a colossal structure guarded by pairs of lamassu, the winged, human-headed bulls of Assyrian tradition, symbols of cosmic power and protection. The very name of the gate was a proclamation of the empire's ethos. All the peoples of the multicultural world were welcome to enter this sacred space, to approach the throne of the great king, and to take their place within his ordered universe. Persepolis was more than a city. It was a sermon in stone. The true glory of Persepolis and the clearest expression of its purpose is found in the breathtaking sculptural reliefs that adorn its staircases and palace walls, particularly those of the Ecbatana, the grand audience hall of Darius and Xerxes, Here, the Achaemenid Empire tells its own story, not in words, but in a silent, magnificent procession of carved figures. This is not art for art's sake. This is ideology made manifest, a vision of empire so clear and so powerful that it remains awe-inspiring 2.5 millennia later. The eastern staircase of the Ecbatana is a masterpiece of political and artistic propaganda. On its walls, in meticulous detail, are depicted delegations from every corner of the vast empire, 23 nations in all, ascending the steps to bring gifts and tribute to the great king. Each delegation is led by a Persian or Median usher, who holds the hand of the leading delegate in a gesture not of subjugation, but of gentle, respectful guidance. The artists took extraordinary care to render the distinct ethnic features, the traditional clothing, and the characteristic gifts of each people. We see Scythians in their pointed hats leading a horse and offering bracelets. We see Ethiopians with their distinctive hair bringing a giraffe and an elephant tusk. We see Ionians from the coast of Anatolia with their pleated tunics carrying vessels and balls of wool. Babylonians, Lydians, Indians, Sogdians, Bactrians, all are present, each group clearly identifiable, each presented with dignity and realism. The message is profound and unambiguous. This is not a record of brutal conquest. There are no scenes of battle, no depictions of weeping captives or vanquished foes being trampled underfoot, as was so common in the art of the Assyrians. Instead, Persepolis presents the empire as a harmonious, voluntary union of diverse peoples, a cooperative enterprise under the benevolent guidance of the Achaemenid king. It is a vision of unity in diversity, of an ordered world where each nation contributes its unique strengths and products to the whole, participating in the grand ceremony of imperial life. This was the idealized self-image of the Achaemenid state, and at Persepolis, this image was literally etched in stone for all the world to see and admire. The Ecbatana reliefs are the empire's great family portrait, a frozen moment of perfect multicultural harmony. Beyond the Ecbatana, the terrace of Persepolis was a forest of monumental structures, each designed to inspire awe and reinforce the central tenets of Achaemenid power. At the heart of the complex stood the great hypostyle halls, forests of stone columns that seemed to defy gravity, reaching heights of over 20 meters to support colossal cedarwood roofs. The Ecbatana itself was a vast square hall, capable of holding thousands of people, its roof supported by 72 of these slender, fluted columns. The capitals atop these columns were another example of the Achaemenid genius for symbolic synthesis, often composed of the double-headed foreparts of bulls or griffins, powerful creatures symbolizing royal strength and divine vigilance. Imagine standing in this hall, a vast, shadowy space illuminated by shafts of light, the air thick with the scent of cedar and incense, surrounded by a multitude of delegates from across the known world, their faces turned towards the elevated throne of the great king. It would have been an experience of overwhelming power and majesty. Nearby stood the Hall of 100 Columns, or the Throne Hall, even larger in area than the Ecbatana. This was likely the main imperial reception hall, where the king would conduct the formal business of the empire. Its reliefs depict the king in heroic combat with mythical beasts, a classic trope of ancient kingship symbolizing the ruler's role as the bringer of order and the vanquisher of chaos. They also showed the king enthroned, elevated above the subject peoples who support his throne, a visual metaphor for the structure of the empire itself. Scattered across the terrace were the more private palaces of the kings, such as the Tachara, or Winter Palace of Darius, and the Hadish, the Palace of Xerxes. These were smaller in scale but exquisitely crafted, with finely carved reliefs on the door jambs showing the king in domestic scenes, attended by his servants. Even the drainage system of Persepolis was a marvel of engineering, a complex network of subterranean channels carved into the rock of the terrace to manage the seasonal rains. a testament to the meticulous planning that went into every aspect of the city's creation. Persepolis was a machine for reverence, a perfectly calibrated environment where every architectural element, every sculptural detail, and every ceremonial space worked in concert to elevate the king, articulate the philosophy of the empire, and create an unforgettable impression of divine order and limitless power. For over a century and a half, the vision of Persepolis held. The great ceremony of the empire continued. The Nowruz festival was celebrated, and the delegations of nations made their reverent ascent up the grand staircase. But no earthly creation, however magnificent, is immune to the corrosive forces of time and human failing. The Achaemenid Empire, which had been founded on a revolutionary principle of tolerance and multicultural integration, began to suffer from the arrogance that so often accompanies absolute power. Xerxes I, the son and successor of Darius, lacked his father's pragmatism and his grandfather's vision. His ill-fated and hubristic invasion of Greece, though initially successful, ended in a series of humiliating defeats at Salamis and Plataea. The burning of the Acropolis in Athens during this campaign was an act of vengeance that would not be forgotten. It planted a seed of bitter resentment in the Greek world, a seed that would one day grow into a forest of Macedonian spears. In the decades that followed, the empire began to experience the classic symptoms of decline. Succession disputes became more common and more violent, with kings rising to the throne through assassination and intrigue. The vast wealth of the empire, once used to build magnificent cities and maintain a loyal army, was now squandered on decadent luxury. Satraps in distant provinces grew more powerful and more rebellious, testing the authority of the central throne, the military, which had once been the most formidable fighting force in the world, began to rely heavily on mercenaries, its core of Persian and Median soldiers diluted. The spirit of unity so beautifully depicted on the reliefs of Persepolis began to fray. The empire became bloated, its administration corrupt, its leadership complacent. It was a giant, magnificent, and imposing, but with a sickness growing in its heart. And from the west, across the Aegean Sea, a new power was rising, a power that was lean, disciplined, and led by a young man who combined the military genius of a seasoned general with the soul of a vengeful god. The stage was being set for a final, terrible confrontation, a clash of civilizations that would decide the fate of the ancient world. The sun was beginning to set on the Achaemenid dream, and the long shadows of the columns at Persepolis were growing ever longer. In the year 334 BC, the storm that had been gathering in the west finally broke upon the shores of Asia. Alexander of Macedon, his army a marvel of tactical innovation and disciplined ferocity, crossed the Hellespont. His stated goal was one of retribution, to avenge the Persian invasion of Greece and the burning of Athens a century and a half earlier. But his ambition was limitless, a fire in his soul that would not be quenched until he had reached the ends of the earth. The Achaemenid king who stood against him was Darius III, a man who was by no means incompetent, but who had the profound misfortune of being matched against one of the greatest military commanders in all of human history at the Battle of the Granicus, then at Issus, and finally, decisively, at Gaugamela. Alexander's Macedonian phalanx and companion cavalry shattered the vast, multi-ethnic armies of the Persian Empire. Darius III was forced to flee, his authority crumbling, becoming a hunted fugitive in his own land. With the Persian field army broken, the path to the empire's heartlands lay open. Babylon and Susa surrendered to Alexander without a fight. He seized the immense treasures stored in their palaces, the accumulated wealth of generations of Achaemenid kings. Finally, in the spring of 3030 BC, Alexander and his army marched into Persia proper. Their destination, the ceremonial soul of the empire, the sacred city of Persepolis. The Greek historian Diodorus Siculus tells us that Alexander described Persepolis to his men as the most hateful of the cities of Asia, and gave it over to them to plunder, sparing only the royal palace complex on the terrace. For days, the Macedonian soldiers rampaged through the lower town, looting homes and slaughtering its inhabitants. But the fate of the Great Terrace, the sacred stage of the empire, was yet to be decided. Alexander and his generals held celebratory games and a great symposium, a drunken banquet, in the very halls that had once hosted the sober, ordered ceremonies of the Persian kings. The air that had once been filled with the solemnity of Nowruz was now thick with the boisterous shouts of victorious, inebriated soldiers. It was in this atmosphere of manic triumph and excess that the final, terrible act of the drama would unfold. The end of Persepolis was not a slow decay, a gentle slide into ruin. It was a conflagration, a deliberate and catastrophic act of destruction that is echoed through history as one of the great symbolic acts of cultural annihilation. The ancient sources, though they differ on the precise details, are unanimous in their depiction of a city consumed by fire. The most dramatic account comes from the historian Clitarchus, later retold by Diodorus Siculus and Plutarch. In his telling, the idea to burn the palace came not from Alexander himself, but from a woman. During the drunken symposium, an Athenian courtesan named Thais, the lover of Alexander's general Ptolemy, stood up and gave a speech. She declared that it would be the crowning achievement of Alexander's campaign in Asia if he were to join them in a victory procession and set fire to the palaces of the Persians, allowing the hands of women to extinguish in a moment the famed accomplishments of the barbarians. It would be, she argued, a fitting revenge for the temples the Persians had burned in Athens. Her words, delivered in the heated atmosphere of the banquet, ignited the passions of the drunken Macedonians. They roared their approval. Alexander, caught up in the frenzy, leaped to his feet and, with a torch in his hand, led a comitatus of revelers out into the night. They went from palace to palace, from the Hall of 100 Columns to the Ecbatana, from the private quarters of Xerxes to the elegant Techara of Darius, and they set them ablaze. The great cedar beams, dried by the Persian sun, caught fire with explosive speed. The tapestries and furnishings that had adorned the halls became fuel for the inferno. A fire that began as a drunken act of revenge quickly grew into an uncontrollable holocaust. The flames, fanned by the wind, would have leaped hundreds of feet into the night sky, a terrifying funeral pyre for the Achaemenid Empire, visible for miles across the plain. Whether the act was a calculated political statement meant to signal to the peoples of Asia that the Achaemenid dynasty was truly and irrevocably finished, or simply the tragic result of a drunken whim, the outcome was the same. The heart of the empire was turned to ash. The fire that consumed Persepolis was an apocalyptic event. It raged with such intensity that the very stones of the palace complex were scarred and weakened. The colossal cedar roofs, masterpieces of engineering, collapsed in a shower of sparks and embers, crashing down onto the palace floors. The immense heat caused the limestone walls and columns to crack and crumble. When the inferno finally subsided, what was left was a ruin, a skeleton of a city, its former glory visible only in the blackened stumps of its columns and the fractured beauty of its fallen reliefs. The destruction was so complete that, for a time, it seemed as though the memory of Persepolis itself might be extinguished. The site was abandoned, left to the elements. Over the centuries, the wind and rain did their slow work. Dust and sand drifted over the terrace, burying the fallen stones, the charred beams, and the ashes of the great fire. Grass grew over the mounds, and the magnificent stage of the Achaemenid Empire slowly disappeared from view, sinking back into the earth from which it had been raised. For nearly 2,000 years, the city was effectively lost to the world. Its true name, Parsa, was forgotten. Local peoples, seeing the enigmatic ruins that occasionally protruded from the soil, spun new legends to explain their origin. They called the site Takht-e, Jamshid, the throne of Jamshid, attributing its construction not to the historical Achaemenid kings, but to a mythical hero from the dawn of time. The reliefs of the tribute-bearing delegations were reinterpreted as scenes from the court of Solomon, and the tomb of Cyrus at nearby Pasargadae was believed to be the tomb of Solomon's mother. The historical reality of the Achaemenid Empire, once the most powerful force on the planet, had dissolved into the realm of folklore and myth. The silence that fell over Persepolis was profound. The city that had been built to be the eternal center of a universal empire had become a place of whispers and legends, its true identity a riddle waiting to be solved. The fire of Alexander had not only destroyed a city, it had, for a very long time, erased a chapter of human history. For centuries, the great cities of the Achaemenid Empire slept under their shrouds of earth and legend. While European scholars knew of the Persian Empire through the writings of Greek historians like Herodotus, its physical reality remained remote and mysterious. The journey to Persia was long and arduous, and the ruins of its past were largely unmapped and unidentified. The reawakening began in the 17th century, as a new wave of intrepid European travelers, diplomats, and merchants began to venture into the heartlands of Iran. These men were often well-versed in the classical texts, and they arrived with Herodotus and Xenophon in their saddlebags. When they encountered the immense, half-buried ruins of the terrace platform and its forest of columns, they were among the first to suspect that they were standing on the site of the legendary Persepolis, the city destroyed by Alexander. Artists and draftsmen accompanying these expeditions began to sketch the strange and beautiful reliefs, their drawings providing Europe with its first tantalizing glimpses of a lost artistic world. The rediscovery of Pasargadae followed a similar path, its identification confirmed by the decipherment of the cuneiform inscriptions that still clung to its palaces, inscriptions that bore the name of Cyrus the Great. The process of rediscovery, however, was slow and piecemeal. It was not until the 19th and early 20th centuries that the age of systematic archaeology began. French, German, British, and later American archaeologists obtained permits to conduct large-scale excavations at sites like Susa and Persepolis. It was a monumental undertaking. At Persepolis, the team from the Oriental Institute of Chicago, led by Ernst Herzfeld and later Erich Schmidt in the 1930s, undertook the Herculean task of clearing the immense accumulation of soil and debris that had buried the terrace. As they dug, the city began to re-emerge, like a ghost rising from its grave. They uncovered the great Ecbatana staircase, its magnificent reliefs preserved in stunning detail by the very earth that had hidden them. They excavated the Hall of 100 Columns, finding a thick layer of ash and charcoal on its floor, the tangible evidence of Alexander's fire. They unearthed the Persepolis Fortification Archive, thousands of clay tablets that provided an unprecedented, detailed look into the day-to-day administration of the empire, recording rations for workers of every nationality and creed. It was as if the empire, silenced for millennia, had suddenly begun to speak again, not in the grand pronouncements of kings, but in the mundane, human details of its daily life. A lost world was being meticulously, painstakingly pieced back together. The unearthing of the Achaemenid capitals was more than just a triumph of archaeology. It was a profound act of historical resurrection. As the palaces of Persepolis were cleared of debris, as the administrative archives of Susa were deciphered, and as the garden plan of Pasargadae was mapped, the true nature of the Achaemenid Empire began to emerge from the shadow of its Greek rivals. For centuries, the popular image of the Persian Empire in the West had been shaped almost entirely by Greek sources, which often depicted it as a decadent, despotic, and monolithic, a barbarian threat to the enlightened, democratic world of the Hellenes. The Battle of Marathon and the Stand of the 300 at Thermopylae were cast as a heroic defense of freedom against a tyrannical eastern horde. But the stones of the lost cities began to tell a different, more complex, and far more nuanced story. The reliefs at Persepolis revealed an empire that celebrated, rather than suppressed, the diversity of its peoples. The administrative tablets showed a highly organized and bureaucratic state that paid its workers, men, women, and children, in carefully recorded rations, a far cry from the Greek image of a slave state built by the lash. The tomb of Cyrus and the founding principles of Pasargadae spoke of a ruler whose vision of empire was based on an unprecedented degree of tolerance and respect for local customs and religions. The famous Cyrus cylinder, discovered in Babylon, further reinforced this image with its proclamation that the king had allowed displaced peoples to return to their homelands and worship their own gods. This archaeological evidence did not erase the reality of the empire's military power or its moments of brutality, but it provided a vital corrective to the one-sided narrative that had dominated Western thought. It revealed the Achaemenid state to be a remarkably sophisticated and, in many ways, surprisingly modern experiment in governing a vast, multicultural society. The lost cities, in their resurrection, gave the Persian Empire back its own voice, allowing it to articulate its own vision of the world, a vision carved in stone and baked in clay, a vision of unity, order, and diversity that still holds a powerful resonance for our own fragmented world. What, then, is the ultimate legacy of these lost cities, these spectral hearts of a vanished empire? To walk among the ruins of Pasargadae or Persepolis today is to experience a profound and complex emotional journey. There is, first, a sense of awe at the sheer scale and ambition of what was achieved. The precision of the stonework, the grandeur of the architectural conception, and the delicate beauty of the reliefs all speak to a civilization at the zenith of its power and artistic confidence. But this awe is inevitably tinged with a deep and abiding melancholy. The shattered columns, the fire-scarred stones, and the profound silence of these once bustling spaces are a visceral reminder of the fragility of all human endeavors. Persepolis, in particular, stands as a monumental testament to the idea of impermanence. It is a stone elegy, a permanent monument to the moment of its own destruction. It reminds us that even the most powerful empires, the most glorious cities, and the most deeply held certainties can be swept away in a historical instant. The fire of Alexander serves as an eternal metaphor for the destructive forces of ambition, revenge, and cultural collision that have shaped so much of human history. The legacy of the Achaemenid cities is thus a dual one. On the one hand, it is a celebration of a remarkable vision, the ideal of a multicultural empire held together by a common allegiance to peace and order. An empire that sought to synthesize rather than to crush remains a powerful and relevant political idea. The ghost of Cyrus and his philosophy of governance still haunts our contemporary debates about empire, globalization, and human rights. His was an attempt to solve the fundamental problem of diversity on a global scale, and the ruins of his cities are the scattered pages of his great, unfinished book. On the other hand, their legacy is a cautionary tale. It is a story of how even the most enlightened ideals can become corrupted by power, how hubris can lead to downfall, and how quickly the forces of chaos can overwhelm the most carefully constructed orders. The journey through the lost cities of the Achaemenids is therefore a journey into the very heart of the human drama, a meditation on our greatest creative impulses and our most devastating destructive tendencies. The story of the Achaemenid Empire's lost cities does not end with their archaeological rediscovery. In the 20th century, these ancient stones became deeply entangled in the politics and identity of a modern nation. For the Pahlavi dynasty, which ruled Iran for much of the century, the Achaemenid past became a powerful symbol of pre-Islamic national glory. The ruins of Persepolis and the tomb of Cyrus at Pasargadae were transformed from mere archaeological sites into national shrines, focal points for a new, secular Iranian identity rooted in the grandeur of its ancient imperial history. The most spectacular manifestation of this was the 2,500-year anniversary celebration of the founding of the Persian Empire, held at Persepolis in 1971. A lavish and extravagant event, it was attended by heads of state and dignitaries from around the world. A tent city of unparalleled luxury was erected on the plain before the ancient terrace, and a grand historical pageant sought to draw a direct unbroken line from Cyrus the Great to the modern Shah of Iran. This appropriation of the past was a powerful but also controversial act. For some, it was a moment of immense national pride, a reawakening of Iran's historical consciousness, and a bold declaration of its place on the world stage. For others, particularly the religious opposition, it was seen as a decadent and blasphemous spectacle, an attempt to supplant the country's Islamic identity with a pagan monarchical one. The stones of Persepolis, silent for so long, were suddenly caught in the crossfire of a modern culture war. After the Islamic Revolution of 1979, the future of these ancient sites seemed uncertain. There were fears that the new regime, viewing them as symbols of a corrupt and un-Islamic monarchy, might neglect or even destroy them. But the roots of the Achaemenid past ran deeper than any single political dynasty. The legacy of Cyrus and Darius had become an inextricable part of the Iranian psyche, a source of cultural pride that transcended political ideology. Today, the sites are protected, managed as UNESCO World Heritage Sites, and remain a profound source of fascination and pride for the Iranian people and for visitors from all over the world. Their story continues to evolve, a testament to the enduring power of the past to shape the present, to become a mirror in which successive generations see their own reflections. And so we stand at the end of our journey, amidst the silent columns and whispering grasses of a world that was lost and found again. We began with a question: what if a dream could build a world? The answer lies here, written in the enduring stone of Pasargadae, Susa, Ecbatana, and Persepolis. The dream of Cyrus, a dream of unity and diversity, did indeed build a world, an empire of unprecedented scale and sophistication. It was a dream given structure by the administrative genius of Darius, a dream that echoed in the mountain fastness of Ecbatana, and a dream that found its most glorious and ultimately tragic expression on the sacred terrace of Persepolis. We have seen how this dream, for a time, held the world in a state of ordered harmony, creating a peace, the Pax Persica, that allowed cultures to flourish and commerce to flow across 3 continents. And we have witnessed the fiery end of that dream, a casualty of hubris, of decay, and of the relentless ambition of a new conqueror. The fire that consumed Persepolis serves as a terrible, timeless lesson, that what is built by human hands can be unbuilt by them, that order is a fragile, precious thing, and that the specter of chaos is always waiting at the gates. Yet, the story did not end in the ashes. It lay dormant, a seed of memory buried in the earth, waiting for a new season of discovery. And in its reawakening, the Achaemenid Empire was given a second life, its true character rescued from the biased accounts of its enemies. The lost cities, in their resurrection, have become more than just historical artifacts. They are now teachers. They teach us about the complexities of empire, the challenges of diversity, and the eternal tension between power and principle. They stand as a powerful counter-narrative to a purely Western-centric view of ancient history, reminding us that the ideals of justice, tolerance, and humane governance were not the sole invention of any one culture. They remind us that history is not a simple story of good versus evil, but a grand, often tragic drama of competing visions, a cycle of creation and destruction, of memory and forgetting. As you turn away from these ruins, as you step back into the light of your own time, carry their silence with you. Remember the Garden of Pasargadae and the hope it embodied. Remember the procession of nations on the steps of the Ecbatana and the vision of a united world it proclaimed. And remember the blackened stones of the Hadish of Xerxes and the terrible price of vengeance. The Achaemenid Empire is gone. Its cities are lost, in the sense that their lifeblood has long since drained away. But their spirit, their story, their warning, and their inspiration, these are not lost. They are here, waiting for any who are willing to listen to the sermon of the stones. The dream of Cyrus is over, but the act of dreaming of a better, more ordered, more humane world is a task that falls to us all. What is a city if not a vessel for memory, a physical container for the collective soul of a people? The cities of the Achaemenid Empire were more than just collections of buildings, they were archives of an idea, each one a chapter in the epic saga of the Persian world state. Pasargadae was the first chapter, a prologue written in the idyllic language of a garden. It was a statement of intent, a promise of a new beginning. Here, in the open plains of Fars, Cyrus the Great did not merely build a capital, he cultivated a concept. The very spaciousness of the design, the deliberate integration of palaces and pavilions into a vast, irrigated parkland was a radical departure from the fortified, fear-driven urbanism of the ancient Near East. It was a landscape of competence. It suggested a power so absolute that it no longer needed to hide behind massive walls, a ruler so secure in the loyalty of his subjects that his home could be a tranquil, accessible paradise. The use of artistic motifs and building techniques from across the known world, Ionian, Egyptian, Assyrian, Elamite, was not a pastiche, but a carefully articulated philosophy. The great king was the master of all peoples, and his home would reflect the totality of his domain, not as a jumble of conquered styles, but as a new, harmonious synthesis. Pasargadae was the empire in its nascent, most idealistic state. It was a place for coronations, a symbolic touchstone, the sacred ground where the dynasty was born. Even after the administrative center of the empire moved, every subsequent Achaemenid king had to return to Pasargadae to be invested with the robes and authority of Cyrus, a ritualistic acknowledgement that all that followed was built upon the foundation of his original, magnanimous dream. The city's eventual eclipse by its successors was not a sign of its failure, but of the empire's evolution from a poetic idea into a complex, functioning reality. Pasargadae was the seed, perfect and self-contained, from which the great tree of the empire would grow. If Pasargadae was the empire's soul, Susa was its brain. Here, the ideals of Cyrus were translated into the practical language of imperial governance by the master organizer, Darius I. Susa was a city of ancient and venerable lineage, a prize of conquest that lent its deep historical legitimacy to the upstart Persian dynasty. Darius's decision to make it his primary administrative capital was a masterstroke of political pragmatism. It shifted the empire's center of gravity westward into the heart of the old Mesopotamian world, making it easier to manage the wealthiest and most populous satrapies. The palace complex he constructed at Susa was a testament to this new, organized, and bureaucratic phase of the empire. As his own foundation inscriptions proudly attest, the creation of the palace was a logistical operation of immense scale, a coordinated effort that drew upon the material and human resources of every corner of the realm. This was not just about building a luxurious residence. It was about demonstrating the king's absolute command over his domain. The ability to bring Lebanese cedar, Indian ivory, and Bactrian gold to a single spot on the plains of Khuzestan was the ultimate expression of imperial power. The art of Susa reflected this new emphasis on order and uniformity. The famous glazed brick panels, with their endless, identical ranks of the elite immortal guards, project an image of disciplined, irresistible force. This was the art of a mature empire, one concerned with projecting an image of stability, reliability, and overwhelming military might. Susa was a city of scribes and officials, of treasurers and tax collectors. It was the bustling, multicultural hub where the complex machinery of the Achaemenid state was run. It was a place of law, of commerce, and of relentless, efficient administration. Yet, beneath this Persian veneer lay the millennia of Elamite history, a constant reminder that the Achaemenid Empire, for all its power, was but one layer in the deep, stratified history of the ancient world. Susa's Achaemenid glory was a brilliant but ultimately transient chapter in the city's epic, multi-thousand-year story. Ecbatana represents a different facet of the imperial identity, the appropriation of the past and the allure of the unknowable. As the former capital of the Medes, The city was a symbol of the Achaemenid dynasty's triumph and its legitimacy as the successor to the region's previous great power. By adopting it as their royal summer residence, the Persian kings were not just seeking refuge from the heat, they were performing a continuous act of political absorption, demonstrating their mastery over the very heart of their old rivals. The city's description by Herodotus, with its 7-colored walls rising to a golden center, gives Ecbatana an almost mythical quality, a place more of legend than of history. Whether this description was accurate or allegorical, it captured the city's reputation as a place of immense wealth and ancient, semi-divine power. It was the mountain treasury, the cool, high-altitude fastness where the riches of empire could be securely stored. But the true power of Ecbatana today lies in its invisibility. Its status as the most archaeologically obscure of the great Achaemenid capitals transforms it into a canvas for the imagination. Lying largely unexcavated beneath modern Hamadan, it is a repository of secrets, the ultimate lost city. It represents the vastness of what we still do not know about the Persian Empire. While we can walk the stones of Persepolis and analyze the tablets from Susa, Ecbatana remains a tantalizing question mark. It reminds us of the humility required in the study of the past, of the fact that so much history remains buried, perhaps forever, beyond our reach. The whispers from Ecbatana are faint, carried on the mountain wind, speaking of Median kings, legendary walls, and a golden age that is now almost entirely the property of myth. It is the empire's dream space, a place where history dissolves into legend, a potent symbol of the deep and often inaccessible layers of the past. And so, we come to Persepolis, the culmination of the Achaemenid journey, the empire's grandest statement of itself. If Pasargadae was the thesis and Susa the antithesis, then Persepolis was the synthesis, a place that combined the idealistic philosophy of the founder with the awesome power of his successors. It was built not to be lived in, but to be experienced. It was a piece of immersive theater, a sacred stage designed for the performance of a single, crucial idea, the king as the center of a harmonious and ordered cosmos. Every element of its design served this central theme. The sheer scale of the terrace, lifting the entire complex above the mundane world, was the first act of elevation. The slow, deliberate ascent via the grand staircase was a forced meditation, a physical act of reverence. The gate of all nations, with its colossal guardians, was the threshold between the profane and the sacred. The Ecbatana was the inner sanctum, where the drama of unity was played out. The reliefs of the tribute bearers are the city's most eloquent text. They depict an empire not based on terror, but on a kind of cosmic feudalism. Each nation brings the best of its land, its culture, its craftsmanship, and offers it to the king. In return, the king guarantees the order that allows them all to prosper. It is a model of reciprocal obligation, a perfectly balanced system with the king as its linchpin. The art of Persepolis is a vision of utopian order, a world without conflict, a world where every known people has a place and a purpose within the grand imperial design. This was, of course, a masterful piece of propaganda. The empire was not always so harmonious. It was won and maintained by the sword, and rebellions were crushed ruthlessly. But Persepolis was not about representing the messy reality. It was about representing the divine ideal. It was the empire as it wished to see itself, a flawless projection of its highest aspirations. It was for this very reason that its destruction was so profound. The fire of Alexander did not just destroy a collection of buildings, it shattered a mirror. It was a violent, nihilistic act that sought to erase not just a city, but the very idea of the city, to prove that the harmonious order it represented was a fragile illusion, easily consumed by the fires of conquest and revenge. The destruction of Persepolis was the symbolic end of the Achaemenid world, but the physical reality of the empire's decline was a more protracted and complex affair. The great cities did not simply vanish overnight. Susa, with its strategic location and long history, continued to be an important urban center for centuries after the fall of the Achaemenids. It became a major city in the Seleucid, Parthian, and Sasanian empires. Its Achaemenid character gradually buried under new layers of construction, new palaces, and new temples. Its loss was a slow process of cultural and architectural superimposition. Ecbatana, too, retained its importance as a regional capital and a key point on the Great East-West Highway. It, too, was built over by successive empires, its Median and Achaemenid past sinking deeper into the earth with each passing century. Pasargadae, however, seems to have faded more quickly. Its purpose was so intimately tied to the founder, Cyrus, and to the initial, idealistic phase of the empire that it had less of a practical function in the more turbulent, pragmatic world that followed. After Alexander's respectful visit, the site seems to have been largely abandoned, its gardens becoming overgrown, its palaces slowly succumbing to the elements and the quarrying of their stones for local buildings. Its loss was one of gentle neglect, a quiet fading into the landscape. Persepolis, in contrast, suffered a violent and instantaneous death. After the Great Fire, it was never rebuilt. It was left as a stark and terrifying monument to the totality of Alexander's victory, a symbol that the Achaemenid dynasty had been utterly and completely extinguished. Its loss was the most dramatic, a sudden, catastrophic silencing. For over 2 millennia, these 4 cities, the 4 hearts of the empire, followed their own distinct paths into oblivion and obscurity, each becoming lost in its own way. Susa through burial by continuity, Ecbatana through the shrouding of modern life, Pasargadae through quiet abandonment, and Persepolis through violent annihilation. They became places of legend, their true histories forgotten, until the dawn of a new age of exploration and archaeology began the slow, patient process of calling them back into the light of memory. The rediscovery and excavation of the Achaemenid capitals in the 19th and 20th centuries was a moment of profound revelation, not just for the history of Iran, but for the history of the world. It was a process that restored a crucial chapter to the human story, a chapter that had, for too long, been told only by its adversaries. The painstaking work of archaeologists from across the globe gradually peeled back the layers of sand and myth, revealing the complex, sophisticated, and multicultural reality of the first Persian Empire. The decipherment of cuneiform inscriptions provided the key, allowing the stones to speak their own names and tell their own stories. Suddenly, the throne of Jamshid was revealed to be Persepolis, the city of Darius and Xerxes. The tomb of Solomon's mother was proven to be the final resting place of Cyrus the Great. History began to displace myth. The impact of these discoveries was immense. They provided a tangible, physical connection to a past that had seemed impossibly remote. They also offered a vital counterweight to the often hostile accounts of the Greek historians. For the first time, scholars could study the Achaemenid Empire on its own terms, through its own art, architecture, and administrative records. This new perspective revealed an empire that was far more than a mere military machine. It was a triumph of organization, a pioneer of administrative techniques, from a standardized currency and system of weights and measures to the famous royal road that connected its vast territories. The thousands of clay tablets found at Persepolis offered an unprecedented window into the economic and social life of the empire, showing a complex state that managed its diverse workforce with meticulous bureaucratic care. The lost cities, once silent, now began to offer up a torrent of information, transforming our understanding of this pivotal period in human history. They revealed the Achaemenid experiment to be one of the ancient world's most ambitious and, for a time, most successful attempts to create a peaceful, stable, and unified global order. Today, the ruins of the Achaemenid capitals stand as a powerful and enduring legacy. They are, on one level, a source of immense national pride for Iran, a tangible link to a pre-Islamic past of extraordinary power and influence. They are monuments that have been woven into the fabric of modern Iranian identity, symbols of a deep historical continuity, but their significance extends far beyond the borders of any modern nation-state. They are part of the shared heritage of all humanity, designated by UNESCO as sites of outstanding universal value. They are classrooms in the open air, places where we can learn profound lessons about the nature of power, the challenges of governance, and the complexities of cultural interaction. Pasargadae, with its serene garden setting and the humble tomb of its visionary founder, continues to pose a fundamental question. Can an empire be built on magnanimity? It stands as the eternal embodiment of the ideal of the just ruler. Susa, with its layers of history, reminds us that no civilization exists in a vacuum, that all cultures are built upon the foundations of those who came before. A continuous, often messy, process of borrowing, adaptation, and transformation. Ecbatana, in its hiddenness, speaks to the limits of our knowledge, a potent symbol of the vast reserves of the past that remain lost to us. And Persepolis, in its shattered magnificence, stands as the ultimate cautionary tale. It is a monument to both the heights of human creative ambition and the depths of our destructive capacity. It warns us of the dangers of hubris and the terrible finality of violence. To visit these sites is to be reminded of the cyclical nature of history, the endless rise and fall of empires, the constant struggle between the forces of order and chaos. They show us that nothing built by human hands is permanent, but that the ideas and stories that animate a civilization can achieve a kind of immortality, echoing down through the millennia, continuing to challenge, to inspire, and to warn the generations that follow. The Great Fire has long since gone out, but the light from its embers still illuminates our world, so we are left, in the end, with the ghosts. The ghosts of cities that were once the centers of the world, the ghosts of kings who dreamed of a universal order, the ghosts of a multicultural empire that rose, flourished, and was consumed by fire. Our journey has taken us across the vast landscape of Achaemenid ambition, from the tranquil conception of Pasargadae to the fiery consummation of Persepolis. We have seen how an idea, a vision of a world united in its diversity, could be translated into the language of stone, landscape, and law. We have walked the ceremonial avenues and the administrative corridors of a global superpower, and we have stood before the silent tombs of its creators. We have also seen how this grand experiment, for all its power and sophistication, was ultimately fragile, susceptible to the timeless human failings of pride, arrogance, and the lust for revenge. The story of the Achaemenid Empire's lost cities is a story of the highest human aspirations brought low by our most basic, destructive instincts. It is a drama of creation and annihilation, a perfect tragedy played out on a world stage, but it is not a story that ends in despair. The very fact that we can stand today amidst these ruins, that we can read their inscriptions and understand their purpose, is a testament to the resilience of memory. For 2,000 years, these cities were lost to history, their names forgotten, their stories twisted into myth. But they were not truly gone. They were merely sleeping, waiting for a time when their story could be heard again. Their rediscovery and resurrection is a victory for knowledge over oblivion, for curiosity over indifference. It proves that no great idea, no significant chapter in the human story is ever truly lost, as long as there are those who are willing to search for it. Let us, therefore, be the guardians of this memory. Let us be the ones who listen to the whispers of the stones and who retell their epic, cautionary tale. For the Achaemenid dream, and all its glory and all its tragedy, is not just a piece of ancient history. It is a mirror. In it, we can see the reflection of our own world, with all its struggles to balance unity and diversity, to build order out of chaos and to find a way for the multitude of human cultures to coexist in peace. The great kings are dust, their treasures scattered, their armies long since vanished. But the questions they tried to answer, the challenges they faced, are still with us. The lost cities of the Achaemenid Empire are silent now, but their legacy is a living, breathing thing, a permanent part of the great, ongoing conversation of civilization.